If I ever catch you within 10 feet of my fence again, I'll come over after you and knock your brains out.
It's kind of a cult movie, for some reason, and people really love it. I have a friend in Arizona who, when I first started talking about it, she said, "Oh, Parrish, that's my favorite movie to watch at 2 a.m.
We were a small town, and to have a movie being filmed right here in little old Windsor was a big deal for those of us that had been involved with tobacco, and there were a lot of us kids were working tobacco.
I thought it was great, as a kid, as a 12-year-old, I thought it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it.
We were starstruck. I mean, it was fine because we got to see Troy and the director, and we learned all their names.
First time I saw it with a couple of the kids who sewed, we walked out of there laughing hysterically. These girls are walking out after a day of work, with their makeup impeccable, their hands aren't dirty, and we're just laughing hysterically.
I think the people were very welcoming, and Windsor was very happy to have them come as a town to film there.
Hartford River summer was hot, humid, and dusty. So the glamour started wearing off quite quickly.
The film was filmed in reverse. The crew initially came, and I want to think July, August, and so the tobacco was already grown, and we're already doing the pickings and the hanging in the sheds, and the curing was already started, and so they did the back end first, and then they came back in the spring. I want to think it was March, April timeframe, to get the seed beds, actually the seedlings going into the, underneath the sash. The little plants, they need to be grown early.
I was 14 years old, and I was an extra in that last scene. So much of it was filmed on our farm, H.C. Thrall and Sons. Producers had to, or the studio actually, came to my dad and said, can we, I think he was paid some, not a lot, but can we use your farm, to film the movie? 25 Day Hill Road. And that was my grandmother's house, and it's now the Marriott Hotel.
Part of it was filmed at our home on River Street, at 285 River Street.
My father, who was a Windsor policeman, was on duty there, probably on security, I'm going to guess, and say keeping people at a distance or what have you.
And then my father heard about it because he got a job as a security person there. My father was a police officer in Windsor, and he and a couple of other police officers got jobs as security on the movie set.
I have heard that the station was involved. That the director, the pathologist here at the time was Gordon Taylor, and everybody knows of Dr. Taylor. He was legend in this area, and he served as helping them out. I have been told that they actually did some filming here. I don't know if it actually made it into the movie. I don't believe I ever saw that, or if I did, it was sort of peripheral. But they do also refer to the experiment station. I think they call it the experimental station. Go on down and learn all you can and find out what's going on. And that's really what we do, is we help growers learn everything they need to know about how to produce a healthy crop.
So when Parrish was being filmed, the producers, I guess, came to the experiment station and asked him for some technical advice on growing tobacco and also on tobacco diseases. So my father gave them some disease tobacco to use in the movie, and he offered them some technical advice on that particular disease. And so the experiment station was mentioned in the movie, and there was a really, really short little scene where they were showing where they had gone to look at the disease tobacco. It was being looked at under a microscope, and if I remember correctly, they filmed that scene in the library of the experiment station, and I think it was my father's microscope, and I know it was his hand holding the tobacco leaf.
I think my father said they're doing some filming on the picture on tobacco.
One evening, early evening, I saw the fire apparatus go by. It wasn't an emergency, no lights, no sirens or anything like that. But I always wanted to be a fireman. My father was a fireman in Pequannock, so I said, well, I got to find out where they're going. So I was able to follow along, and they went into right about where the access road is to the landfill off of Prospect Hill Road now. At that time, it wasn't an access road, it was a private road between two tobacco fields. I couldn't figure out what was going on. There was no excitement, there was nothing going on, but I saw lights, saw people walking around and everything. I had no idea what was going on, so I went further up to Day Hill and turned around and came back and looked again, and I said, I got no idea what they're doing, what they're going on.
The whole town was all excited about this. They let us all just hang out and watch everything.
Part of the reason I think they came to us was because we were good friends with Red and Bunny Shepherd, who lived in South Windsor, and it was Red Shepherd's sister who wrote the book. She's Mildred Savage. Because we were good friends, possibly the book was about some of the actual farmers in the valley. I don't know how much of it was, well, I know a lot of it was fiction, but I don't know how much of it was based on fact. So some of the people seem to be based on people that I know.
The movie was basically about a young man who came back from the Navy, who was a Navy veteran, and his mother, Ellen McLean, I think was her name. She played Ellen McLean in the movie. Lived at Sailor Post's house. She worked for Sailor Post, but she lived at the house. And so Troy Donahue was going to move into the house and I guess work for Sailor Post, but that didn't work out. And so Judd Rake offered him a job. They followed, from the seedlings, to the planting and the harvesting, the pickings, and then the drying in the sheds, curing in the sheds. Well, this is Tobacco Valley, and the movie was about shade tobacco, and this is, where it was.
So the Connecticut River Valley has got very nice, well-drained soils. There used to be an ancient lake when the glaciers melted. This is the area where tobacco does really well, and it's also the reason why people moved. Connecticut, and Windsor is the first town, and rather than being on the coast somewhere, they came here because the soils were so good for agriculture. And one of the first crops that they planted was tobacco. That was doing very well in Virginia. It was probably one of the big economic engines for all the colonies. So that's one of the first things they grew here. And over time, they grew and selected tobacco types, brought in things from other places for cigars. And we still do that here. And this is an area that produces some of the best, if not probably the best cigar wrapper in the world.
Connecticut shade tobacco was the gold standard for leaf wrapper, okay? The nets that we have here as a display item The nets are designed to filter the sun. Okay, they don't keep bugs out, things like that. They filter the sun, and it creates a thinner leaf.
Well, my father was a tobacco man all his life. He worked for his uncle, and they grew tobacco on Prospect Hill Road at the corner of West Street and off of Prospect Hill Road. And they were broadleaf, actually Havana farmers. And then my father had some rough times. His tobacco shed got blown over by the '38 hurricane, and he had his whole income in the shed when it blew down, so we ended up working for another company and renting the land to them for shade. And I grew up hanging around with him all my life, so I was with tobacco since I can remember, my earliest memories, and I worked on tobacco myself for 4 years as soon as I turned 14. As a matter of fact, the week I turned 14 was in October, and my father hauled me off to a tobacco shed that they rented over on River Street from Thrall's, which was just taken down from the Amazon, but that was my first paid day working on tobacco.
We got our first property in Windsor granted by, I guess it was by the state, possibly by the town, for valor during the Pequot Wars. So the first paycheck, I started probably when I was 9 or 10, and my first job was picking leaves up off the floors of the sheds that had been dropped. And then after that, I started in on the regular sewing and the inside things, probably when I was about 15 or so. And then eventually I became kind of an assistant straw boss.
Jesus, I don't know. I think I did 3 years, I think. 3 or 4 years, I don't know. Yeah, I work out in the field, and then they put me inside a shed, and whatever they needed, I did.
If you want to make money sewing, that is one hard job because you just work constantly. You stop a half an hour for lunch. You're filthy when you walk out of that shed at night. And if you want to get 9 or 10 bundles a day, you just don't stop.
What would happen is we would be sewing, and then when we finished up our bundle of 50, we would call for bundle, and they would come bring us a new bundle, and the shed boss would come and put a punch on our card that was hanging next to our sewing machine. If you sewed, let's say, I'm going to guess, 8 bundles in a day, they gave you a free punch. So you got the 9th bundle free. That I recall.
I was working tobacco at the time, so I kind of had a little bit of an inkling of what went on. But they used the kids from Loomis Chaffee for any of the extras, the scenes that actually the kids wouldn't even be doing. The regular tobacco workers would be doing the stringing of the cotton batting kind of thing that covered the fields. That's something that we wouldn't have even been doing, but it was a good shot. They were there, but they were dressed like they were going to a Sunday picnic. So we knew that was wrong because I know how I came home every day looking. So that wasn't exactly right.
And so the school was contacted to see if a group of, I believe, 20 Chaffee girls could be available for the film. And I think Loomis sent some boys as well. But so we were asked, and it was the seniors and then the juniors, and I was a junior at the time, who were members of the Glee Club because we had to be able to sing. And of course, we all said yes. And then we were told which days off we would have. And we had to be paid by Warner Brothers the required minimum salary for an extra of $22.50 per day. Hence, Warner Brothers issuing the Social Security numbers. However, the catch was that we then had to pay the money back to Chaffee. So, but I still got to keep my Social Security number.
I was in that final scene with all the kids from Chaffee, kind of towards the back. I don't think anyone's seen me, although people have reported that they have. I don't really believe it because I can't see me. I received my first paycheck ever from this movie. And I think it was about $30, which was a huge amount back then. And you'll hardly believe this story, but I had it on our kitchen table to take it to the bank or do something with it the next day. And we were robbed sometime that night. And my biggest fear was that they had taken my paycheck and they had taken cash and things like that.
I think they must have busted us up there. And we did our little song where we came and helped Troy. And then they also had another scene where they had maybe about 10 people standing on a platform that were threading the needles through the tobacco. I also went up there, off time and saw things. The one thing I remember most about being up there on the clock is on a Friday, they brought us box lunches. And of course, being Catholic, they were going to have meat. So they did get special dispensation for us to eat meat on Friday. And I think there was like a sandwich in there and must have been fruit or something. But we were told we had to wear jeans, which in those days we didn't wear jeans, and, a bright colored shirt. So that's why you'll see everybody in about the same outfit. But they gave us a little pay stub, and I think we were paid like $27.50. I have to look at it because I saved it.
Big moment was when we sang our song, which was also supposed to be released with the movie so that it would be forever famous. And it was called, the title should have told you this was not going to be a big hit. We're in hidely hodily, high spirits. Your spirits, my spirits. And then it all repeats. And we sing this coming down a hillside and singing. And then they say, no, go back up to the top. You climb the hill, it's still hot, it's still humid. We sing the same diddly song. And that goes on over and over again. I did see the movie several times since. And when you actually see the movie, this thing that took us half the day going up and down the hot hill, I think has roughly 42 seconds in the movie.
We sang that song and we went around we were at the field right near the irrigation pond. And also right next to that was the potato storage. And that was where Troy Donahue was up on the tractor. And you really almost didn't even know that it was a potato storage, but it was kind of built in to the side of the hill.
But the glamour wore off. And the first time I clearly remember it was when Troy Donahue was sitting on a tractor in a cutaway part of a tobacco barn, so the light was okay. And he's sitting there, and all we knew was that someone off stage was saying, "So, where's the rest of your crew?" And Troy Donahue would say, "I'm it." No. "Where's the rest of your crew?" "I'm it." And this went on. I swear Troy Donahue had to say, "I'm it," 20 different times. And it was getting hotter and hotter and more humid. So the glamour sort of went out of that.
And all he had to say was, "I'm it." And he had to do like at least 50 takes to do that. And at the end, he got so frustrated. I mean, he almost started to cry. And of course, here's this big actor And he was just having trouble saying 2 words. So, of course, I'd never seen anybody with eye makeup before or eyeshadow. And of course, he had nice blue eyes and he wore all that eyeshadow.
I didn't have a lot of interaction, say with, I was near Troy Donahue, watching him. He was, a good-looking guy, and all the women in the movie, were in love with Troy Donahue.
And Troy Donahue basically said, are you the kids who are going to be in this? You are? Okay, fine. Now, all you need to do is just stay out of the way and shut up and don't do anything until someone tells you to do it. And then please do it so this doesn't take too long. So that was the glamorous conversation with Troy Donahue.
He was nice enough. I didn't gravitate towards him really at all.
Yeah, it must have been after school. And I remember vividly that it was slightly drizzly out. And so I went over and observed, and I remember standing a short distance from the shed where they were filming. And I remember the lights being very bright. It was a really dreary day, but the lights inside the shed were very bright. And Troy, and I think it was Connie Stevens, were doing a scene. Well, what can I say, except he was totally gorgeous. Very good looking, definitely. Well, I believe what happened was when they finished filming, he stepped outside, and having had my father on that location for several days, I guess, he sort of knew the people. And I think he just said, could I have a picture taken with my daughter? And it happened very quickly. I'm sure I was very embarrassed, of being pulled into this photo, but now I'm glad I have it.
Well, at the end, I had him sign my shirt. He started to sign my shirt, and then, of course, when he got to my bra strap, he goes, oops. And, of course, I must have turned bright red because, of course, I wasn't used to any of that. I mean, people came out from all over to stand around and watch it. We went and watched the fight where Troy jumps over the fence and hits the guys. So that was exciting.
I was introduced to some of the actors that was there. It was Troy Donahue, Connie Stevens.
They wanted to show Troy planting with the big setter, planting the tobacco in the field. Troy could drive the tractor, but Troy could not keep the tractor straight. He was like all over the place with the tractor wheels, crushing the tobacco that had been planted. So it all had to be taken up, and they let my father drive the tractor with the hat that Troy had on, and not to look back, not to look backward. And it shows my father driving just straight down the field, planting the tobacco. But everybody in the movie thinks it's Troy.
My straw boss, Violet, thought Troy Donahue was the dumbest person she ever met. He was supposed to plant the tobacco. The back of the tractor has a gizmo that goes around. So you have to put them in roots up, so when it goes around, they plant. He was putting them all in leaves up. She thought he was incredibly stupid. That was all she had to say about Troy.
My parents were very, very enthusiastic about Claudette Colbert and Dean Yeager and Karl Malden. They thought they were the greatest. And of course, I was more interested in some of the younger ones.
Yeah, Karl Malden and Dean Jagger and Claudette Colbert. She was not as visible because they must have put her into one of those, like a tent or something right after any scenes. She didn't have very many scenes in Windsor. Most of her scenes were at the supposed rake house. She did scenes there and somewhere on the shore, because they supposedly had a beach house down there. So Karl Malden I didn't see a lot of because most of his scenes were, I think, not in Windsor.
I didn't have any real interaction with them. I know my parents and grandparents, I have pictures of that too, were invited to Hartford to have dinner with them. And
Sharon Hugueney was the star, and she was just a sweet little actress. I don't think she came, to be anything else but that. But, we saw a lot of her, and because everybody's just milling around.
She was a sweetheart. She was, of course, the closest to my age. She was probably, I'm guessing, around 17 or 18 at the time. Connie was probably 22.
Well, Sharon Hugueney came out several times and, told us how very happy she was we were there and how seriously she took this great opportunity. And then she said, "I'm sorry, I have had my lunch brought in to me and I have to eat it over here. And your lunches are over there." Well, her lunch was some sort of a very fancy-dancy, well-presented little rolls of something or other. And ours were basically Wonder Bread sandwiches and an apple. And so we ate out of our baggies and she ate off her little dainty plate.
She was kind of our favorite because she was only a couple of years older than us. So that was a little bit of a source of, some, not controversy exactly, but it was just an odd kind of thing because we saw her during her scenes. She was riding a bicycle. She had pigtails and she was riding a bicycle. We got to walk right up to her and talk to her while in between. And she told us she was 16 and she was, this was like her first big kind of movie. She'd been in some smaller Westerns and things on television, but this was her first movie. And the thing that made it kind of odd was we couldn't check then because they didn't have Google or anything then, but later on you could check and saw that supposedly when the movie came out in May of 1961, they said she was 20, which was not possible because she was 16. She told us that. I think the reason what we did when we were talking about it was there was an older guy who used to visit her on the set. And every time her scenes were finished, he would kind of whisk her away. And we found out after that they got married right after the movie came out. And so she would have been 17. So I think that might have been part of the impetus for suddenly being 20 when the film came out.
Sharon Hugueney loved my pony. I had a big pony named Champion, and I have a picture that I brought with me of Sharon Hugueney on my pony. Paige, little sidebar, but my oldest daughter's middle name is Paige because of the movie. We named her Paige.
If this was her first time as an actress, she had just been discovered. She was very natural and really nice and everything, and had her mother with her because she was so new and so young. And of course, I was young too, so I really liked her. She told me about the scene that she tried out for in order to get the part, and it was that scene where she cries. And she said how hard it was to to actually cry when there's nothing really sad happening.
Connie Stevens was a sweetheart. Actually, Connie Stevens took my bike and I took my brother's bike and we went for a bike ride up River Street, but she was due on set. So when we came back, they weren't real happy with Connie because they're waiting for her to be on set.
Who was it? Connie Stevens. What I remember about her was her makeup, and it was about a half an inch thick. And I thought, you poor thing, you're going to have a horrible complexion when you're older. Yeah. I mean, she was a big star at that point.
Connie Stevens was probably the most congenial of the group, and she used to sit and talk to us. We'd all sit in a circle around in front of her, and she would talk to us. And Troy Donahue used to kind of do his own thing, and but Dean Jagger and Hope Summers, those people were very, very welcoming and friendly toward us.
We were starstruck. I mean, it was fine because we got to see Troy and the director, and we learned all their names. Dean Jagger, I think he was just starting out when I read in those days, but he was there. So we saw a lot of them. They were the ones who helped us.
We watched the filming every day, and we were allowed to be like right on top of them while they were doing their scenes, which was really nice. A couple of times we got a little bit in the way. I think that the director was really very nice, and he was patient, really, with having kids on the set.
Judd Rake, the father, who lived in Hartford, in a office building in Hartford, gentleman farmer, had told his oldest son, Edgar Rake, that he wanted him to learn the business, and he was sending him to the farm. Well, the farm was the McCormick farm. Okay, that was our home. And you see in the movie, you see him, the moving van coming and moving into the house that was our family house.
I just got my driver's license. I turned 16, and I saw them filming on what we called the Ransom Farm, and they were filming, and they'd stopped the traffic on Pequannock Avenue, but I found reasons to drive by because I was interested in it. They were also filming on Old River Street, a part that you can't drive on now. It's kind of blocked off along the river. And I drove by there. They were working in Howard McCormick's farm at that time. So I got to see that.
Troy Donahue, the seed beds, they have to, it gets too hot sometimes. So you have these blocks, and you open up the sash, and you put a block in, and then the heat would come out. And if the temperature got too low, you'd have to put it down again. Well, the blocks you would kind of leave in the alleyways. You just kind of drop them. Troy Donahue tripped over one of the blocks and fell right through one of the glass sashes. Right through it. It's in the movie. You can hear the glass break, and you kind of see him pull himself up. If you're watching in the movie at that stage, you'll see, you'll hear it, that he went down. And he was wearing a long sleeve. It seemed like farmers wore long sleeve white shirts all the time for whatever reason. But he was wearing a long sleeve white shirt. It was punctured right through his arm. And he was bleeding all over. They had to get the doctors. And we had so many people wanted that shirt, especially young ladies.
Teet's house, that was also on our farm. They were tenants of ours. The real people who lived there were tenants. Next to that is a field, and that's where that final scene was. Next to that, or near the road from that, is the irrigation pond, and then just to the right of it was the potato storage.
Mm-hmm. Some of them were filmed in East Windsor. The broadleaf scenes were filmed in East Windsor, but most of the shade scenes were done in Windsor.
There was filming, as I understand, over in East Windsor. There was filming. Some of the filming inside the sheds, when the sheds were curing, my grandfather had two very large sheds, as big as many of the Thrall sheds, very large sheds over in Tunxus Avenue in Bloomfield. But some of the filming was in those sheds, with the charcoal, to heat the inside of the barn to cure the tobacco, because it's the curing of tobacco is very delicate. It's very delicate.
The water tank is still in the same place, and that water tank appears in the film on Day Hill. And I know where the film was on Marshall Phelps because they put up a fence. The closing where they jumps the fence, and the fence was there another 10 years.
And I'm not sure how true this is because I've read other things since then, but when the firemen came to help and put out the fire, apparently they were all waving, so they had to redo the scene. Now, I also read something else about it, that they had a little too many drinks, but I don't know what that story is.
The fire scene impacted us because they actually burned down one of our fields and the tent cloth. So that they had to, pay for. What happened I have it on good authority, was that they set the field on fire, and the firemen, the Windsor Fire Department, was to come and put out the fire. Well, they drank a little bit too much beer and kind of ruined the scene. So instead of using that cut of the film, they had to film it again in miniature. And I did get a chance to watch that in person, you know, stand there and say, what's going on here? So that's what happened. They wanted to do another field. And Dad said, no, you know, you're not going to burn down all my fields. They're too valuable. It was just on a table, you know, in like a metal thing, so it wouldn't spread anywhere else. And someone made the miniature scene, and then they set it on fire.
I tend to believe that because I've seen a lot of tobacco sheds burn, unfortunately, because I joined the fire department, like I mentioned, in 1961. And they don't quite go burning the way they had the movie. Usually what happens is the roof goes off and the siding goes off, but the columns, like behind me here, stand up, and those were falling over in the movie. So I kind of lend more credibility to they filmed the model.
And then they dubbed in, I guess, the fire department.
The fire chief was Carol O'Connor, later known as Archie Bunker, but there was a lot of action, but they did not get any close-ups of the firemen. So they came to Pequannock, and this night scene, they wanted close-ups of the firemen putting the fire out. So they had nozzles, and they actually brought attire from Broad Brook. The coats were from Broad Brook, and they just shot close-ups of 3 Pequannock firemen, 2 of which I recognize in the movie. One was Pete Lord, who later was mayor in Windsor, and the other was John Catalinas, a longtime resident of Pequannock, very well-known fisherman. And there was a 3rd fireman who, unfortunately, I can't recall, and I've checked with a few other folks that didn't know who that 3rd one was, but how I know it, they were paid the union scale because they used close-ups of them, and they turned their money over to the fire department, and that was the connection with that. So
I had a Holstein calf at the time named Daisy, and she was supposed to be in a scene that was going to be behind the potato storage. And they had set out plastic flowers to kind of decorate the area. And cows are somewhat like goats. And she was an excellent star actress. And except with one problem, she ate all the plastic flowers. So they had to cut that scene. And I was crushed when I saw the movie and Daisy wasn't in it.
It came out in May, like May 4th or something like that. It was early May. And we couldn't wait to see it because we wanted to see, you know, what happened. So there were some parts that just, when we got into the theater and we were like, oh, brother, when did that happen? You know?
I've watched it a lot. I guess the first time I saw it, I was kind of thrilled with it and thrilled with being able to recognize so much. And but I still do this. When I see people kind of what I consider to be overacting, it makes me a little embarrassed or something for them. And I did feel like some of it was overacted.
Oh, it was so accurate. It really was. I mean, they glossed over some things, but, and not taking anything away from the movie, but if I could add to it, I read the book. And I could picture people I knew from the characters in the book, because they were more fully developed in the book than they didn't have time to do it in the movie. But I don't want to name them, but I can see characteristics in those people that I actually knew that I worked with or and had acquaintance with.
I know when it was first on TV, okay, I was married and I had a baby, and she was maybe about 6 months old. And we were all sitting on the couch and we knew our scene was coming up. So we all rushed, my husband and I and the baby rushed over to the TV, and there was a hammock in front of the TV. He fell over that. I went to catch him. So we never did see, what was on there. But my family a few years ago gave me the CD.
I think it was I either saw it at Hartford or Plaza Theater. I think the first time I saw it. I mean, I now have a VHS copy and a DVD of it, but as I say, I don't think I've looked at it in more than 20 years. Some of my friends used to like to hear the stories about, because, I was there. I think actually by the seed beds, when they were doing the seed beds, there's a shot there where I'm kind of on the side. A friend of mine, our little 12-year-olds, because that was the spring, and so I would have been 12 by then.
There was one time when there was a scene that they did, and we were all standing like right by the fence, and they were right. It was Troy Donahue and Hampton Fancher, and every time I see the movie, I think of that scene because Troy grabs a hold of Hampton Fancher, and he pulls him to the fence, and he says, "Look over there." And I think it's supposed to be where the plants are burning, and he doesn't. So Hampton Fancher is supposed to say a line, and of course we after 10 or 12 takes, we knew all those lines by heart, and it seemed to me it was taking forever to get the line out, and he finally did, and then one other time he didn't get it out, and we all repeated it. We said the line, and of course the director said, "Well, that was very nice, but not helpful here. We need to have the actors say the line." He could have kicked us out right then, but he didn't. But it was fun. And Troy Donahue laughed. He thought that was kind of funny.
My parents did have a big party at one point during the filming with all the cast and all the producers and everyone. And I believe that was at our house. So that was, a little bit of an impact. But my mother loved making parties happen.
We have the Tobacco History Museum and stuff. And I think it's good for people to understand, what we did in the area, what grew there, what agriculture, what everything that was going on at the time. And I think that helped it. And it also made it didn't really glamorize it at all. There were some Hollywood aspects to it, but I think it really showed an accurate depiction of what went on in those days, when people were picking tobacco.
Maybe 10 years after it was released, and I'm trying to think of his name and I'm not coming up with it, who came to Windsor and got a job with my father, a full-time job, because of the movie. And he loved the movie so much and wanted to learn the profession.
Newcomers wouldn't relate to it as closely as those of us that had been here forever.
I think for most of it was a pretty exciting thing. It's the first thing we had done like that in our lifetime.
I just thought it was pretty cool with being around Connie Stevens, and I thought it was pretty cool, and Paige.
So it was a lot of fun. I'll never forget it. I'm very glad we did it. And I learned that making movies is not necessarily glamorous.
Windsor really never had any big claim to fame. I mean, in a national sense. I mean, locally, yes, we're the oldest town, Shad Derby, but when it comes to a national thing, and even when I went to college in the fall of '61, and started, for some reason it came up, oh, I saw that movie, oh, that's where you lived. I mean, there was a continuation of the fame, I guess you could call it, that Windsor got from the movie Parrish. So I think that adds to the dynamics, you might say, of the interaction between the movie and the town of Windsor.